Remember back when the New Orleans Saints offense was super fun to watch? Well, if you ask me, it might be back. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much to all the everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, you can always subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. And if you want to keep the conversation going one-on-one with me, take part in our exclusive Q&As, film studies, inside information, early access, all that, you can head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints today to join a community that I would love for you to be a part of. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media. You can find me as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site, covering the New Orleans Saints every Tuesday on the Locked On NFL podcast, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Tell you more about them here in a moment, but today we're going to go over some of the practice notes from the Superdome practice on, it was day 14, the last day of practice before the New Orleans Saints get ready for the preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs, which we'll also get into. What should you watch for during that preseason game? But first and foremost, remember the days when the New Orleans Saints would take the field and what you knew about them was that the offense was going to light it up? Drew Brees, Marcus Colston, Lance Moore, Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush, Robert Meacham, Devery Henderson days, Jimmy Graham the first time, all those other pieces, and more, of course. I don't mean to leave anybody out, but there were a lot of names on those New Orleans Saints offenses. Well, I got some good news for you. I think offense might be back here in the city of New Orleans, and that's a very, very fun thing to say, because if you remember from last season, one of the things that I always talked about was it's one thing to be bad, which this New Orleans Saints team last year, let's face it, they were, if nothing else, borderline bad. I think we can all admit that, especially over on the offensive side, specifically on the offensive side. So it was one thing to be bad. It was another thing to be bad and boring. It's like the opposite of bad and bougie. It's bad and boring. And that's what the New Orleans Saints offense ended up being last season. It was bad and it was boring. This year, it's not going to be boring, and I certainly don't think that it's going to be bad. And I think that we get a real opportunity here to see that a little bit over the course of the preseason game. Now, remember, we are going to see starters during the preseason game on Sunday, but last year we saw starters in the preseason game. And they looked great. Jameis Winston doling them out to Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave. And then we saw what happened with the offense last year. So we can't completely take what we see on Sunday, for better or for worse, and translate it into the expectation for the entire 2023 season. But what we can say is this. There's a lot of things that the New Orleans Saints are doing on the offensive side that I think harken back to the days of more explosive offenses here in the city. We're seeing things like misdirection in the backfield before handoffs, whether that's a motioning player behind the line of scrimmage that the ball goes to, or it's a fake to that player and then it gets handed off to the running back that's going the opposite direction. We're seeing a lot of motion again. We're seeing these sort of concepts downfield that look a lot more familiar than what we've seen over the course of the past couple of years. Dagger concepts, Texas routes, these sort of angle concepts, things like that we're seeing, or angle routes that we're seeing. There's a lot of stuff that we're seeing now in this New Orleans Saints offense that we just simply haven't seen over the course of the past couple of years. And a lot of that was set up to not be the case, right? I mean, when you built your offense around Jameis Winston, you built it to be exciting. You built it to take the top off. You did all those things, but then you weren't able to run the offense with Jameis Winston either of the last 2 years. The expectation here is that as you have built this offense for Derek Carr, that Derek Carr will be able to lead the offense for 17 games. But they haven't left it to being entirely circumstantial around the quarterback. They've built up the running back room. They've built up the tight end room. They've built up the wide receiver room. They've built up the playmakers so that whether the quarterback is there or they're a different quarterback, whatever it might be, that they at least have the appropriate players to be able to go out there and make plays and get those players out on the field. And what we're seeing over and over again over the course of at least this past week, where we've seen a little bit more of the game prep for the New Orleans Saints offense, we've seen a lot more attacking downfield. We've seen a lot more cleanliness in terms of the offensive operation. Getting in and out of breaks by these wide receivers is creating a ton of separation, especially Michael Thomas and Chris Olave, and the little bit of Rashid Shaheed that we got to see before his injury has kind of held him back over the course of the last couple of weeks. He was doing that as well. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this New Orleans Saints offense, and it's not just built around any one player. The same thing as I mentioned with them building up all those offensive weapons and those playmakers. If Michael Thomas has another injury, you still got Chris Olave, you still got Rashid Shaheed starting in week 1. If you're, Alvin Kamara is suspended for the first 3 games, you still got Jamal Williams, you still got Kendre Miller. So there's a lot of these pieces that have gone into the New Orleans Saints offseason of making sure that they've kind of taken care of themselves and safeguarded themselves in case there are any of those pesky things that pop up throughout the season in order for them to be able to maintain their offensive efficiency. So I'm feeling very excited about where the New Orleans Saints offense is. I'm feeling particularly excited about Chris Olave. I'm this close to telling you that if you've got an extra $5, you should head over to FanDuel right now and put $5 down on Chris Olave for Offensive Player of the Year, because this dude just will not stop making plays. And remember, he's unable to stop making plays and has been unstoppable by last year's number 2 passing defense in the NFL. And it's not a situation to where coverage is breaking down or situations in which, he's just a free runner downfield or anything like that. He's literally making catches over players. He's just outplaying players in one-on-one situations and coming down with the ball. It's him making plays. And so I think that that's the thing that really sets this apart in terms of the excitement that you can have around Chris Olave, around this New Orleans Saints offense, around Derek Carr, and say, okay, it's not just that the scheme is back. It's not just that, they're going to go up against defenses that aren't as good as the defense they've gone up against in training camp. It's that individually these players are playmaking. They're making plays. And I think that's one of the big things that you're going to see. And look, I see a lot of questions popping up in the chat. Will we see this player on Sunday? Will we see that player on Sunday? Will we see this player during the preseason game? Dennis Allen told us straight up, if they're healthy and available, they're playing. So that's what you should expect. You should expect to see Michael Thomas. You should expect to see Derek Carr. You should expect to see Jamal Williams and Alvin Kamara probably and all these other folks. Remember, Alvin Kamara, even though he's suspended for the first 3 games of the season, he can still appear in preseason games. So I think that there's a whole bunch of this offense you're going to get a look at from the top to the middle to the bottom in terms of this roster as well. And none of this is to say that the Saints defense has been struggling. I think the Saints defense has been outperforming the offense all training camp so far. However, there's a lot to be said about how good this offense has still found its moments and how steady this offense has been. Derek Carr threw an interception in team drills today. It was his first interception that he's thrown. That tells you 2 things. 1, Derek Carr's not putting the ball in harm's way. And 2, when he did, the defense made him pay for it. Remember, takeaways are just as much sometimes about the skill to get there, of course, but sometimes it's just about taking advantage of opportunities that good quarterbacks give you when they make one bad play. And you got to make them pay for that. And the New Orleans Saints defense has shown that they can do that. So on top of this iron sharpens iron conversation that we've seen, I think offense is finally back here in the city of New Orleans, but the defense is making it so that that offense has to show up 100% of the time. So that's going to be very, very exciting to see the fruits of that labor during the regular season. Coming up next, what should you be watching for in preseason game 1, knowing that you're going to see the starters, but also what other expectations should you have about players that are trying to prove themselves? We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Oh, well, I can't do that yet. I got to tell you, it's time for me to tell you about LinkedIn. I'm trying to get to the next segment already. No. Let me tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the number one source that you're looking for when it comes to hiring, when it comes to building up your small business. You know how it goes, right? Anytime that you're trying to hire, it's always a high stakes situation. You're trying to find people with the requisite experience that fit the culture of your job, all of those things. That's one of the reasons why people love LinkedIn Jobs, to help them with their hiring practices. You can even use LinkedIn Jobs to find a job too. But if you're somebody that's looking to hire, LinkedIn Jobs is a must. You can raise some awareness with the hashtag hiring purple little photo frame that you can put on your profile photo to help spread the word that you're hiring. You get access to a bunch of really, really useful tools like screening questions. So you can kind of vet these candidates, so you can bring in the folks that you want to interview who have the requisite experience. All of these reasons are among the many that small businesses ranked LinkedIn Jobs number one at providing quality hires versus leading candidates. LinkedIn Jobs wants to help you find the candidates you want to talk to faster, and you can post your job for free today at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. There we go. Now we got it. We're rolling right along here. I want to go over the things that you should be paying attention to and looking forward to when it comes to the preseason, football here. What are you watching, and what should you take away from this? So what I will say is that we will see the starters. I don't think that that's any surprise. I mean, we've all been reporting it all week. You're going to see the starters on the offensive and on the defensive side. So what are you going to get to take away from all this? Well, starting with the offensive side, you're going to get an opportunity to see if the hype that I just I was trying not to be like unnecessarily hype or trying to sell you something that you shouldn't buy when it comes to New Orleans Saints offense, but we have seen really, really promising things, especially from the top level playmakers in particular, including guys like Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, so on and so forth. So what I would say is that when you're watching the New Orleans Saints offense, the starting offense, what you're just trying to see is efficiency, right? Can they move the ball down the field? If they get into the red zone, can they cash in for 7 instead of having to settle for 3? Those are kind of the biggest things that I think that you're really trying to watch for, is to make sure that like this offense is going to be able to put itself in position to produce and also score some points on the backside of that, right? Move the ball, but also be able to get into the end zone. So there's a lot of that's going to be going on that you're definitely going to want to watch for. And then just the efficiency of the offense, Derek Carr getting in and out of the huddles. Procedural penalties were a thing for the New Orleans Saints last year, particularly on the offensive side. They had a lot of trouble with things like false start penalties, like delay of game penalties, all those kinds of things. And so I think that what you're trying to find when it comes to New Orleans here is that they can evade those concerns. That was a big issue for them last year. Can they get out of that? And we've seen them be pretty clean with all that here throughout the 2023 training camp so far. And so I think that there's good things to expect from that, but we'll see how things go all throughout. The other side of it is that the Kansas City Chiefs are expected to play their starters as well. So if the Saints offense is clicking, it's going to be clicking against a starting unit and against a good unit. It's not going to be going up, the first team guys going up against some other team's second team or third team or something like that. The idea here is that you're going to make sure that you're going up against a starting unit of talented players and all that. And then the same case goes over to the opposite side on the defense, that the New Orleans Saints defense, which has fared very well all offseason thus far, is going to be put up against a Patrick Mahomes-led, very talented, very good, very explosive Kansas City offense that wants to learn that its offense is still a big part of its game, just like the New Orleans Saints do as well. So you're going to see a determined Kansas City Chiefs offense going up against this New Orleans Saints determined defensive unit. And you're going to be able to see them go head to head with one another and see how this New Orleans Saints defense actually looks against a team that they're not as used to, right? That they're not seeing, all right, well, they're running this play out of this formation. We've seen this 80 times already so far during training camp. Like, you get to remove all that stuff and then instead be ready to go up against a new offense. Now, it's going to be a vanilla offense. Let's be real. It's not going to be, everything that we have seen from the Kansas City Chiefs, or even you're not going to see everything that the New Orleans Saints have in their coffers throughout this either. But you are going to get to see efficiency, and you are going to get to see a defense full of very young players be able to test itself against the best quarterback playing in today's game in Patrick Mahomes. And look, if they can get something done against Patrick Mahomes in that one series or whatever it is, the best quarterback that they play this season is Trevor Lawrence, who's a very good quarterback. But after that, you've got Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins. So if you can get it done against Patrick Mahomes, you can get it done against some of these guys. That's the confidence that I think that you're going to see. So I think that those pieces, in terms of just being able to build the confidence of going up against and hopefully executing against an unfamiliar opponent, that will go a long way for the Saints going into the 2023 regular season. The next piece that I would look at beyond the starters is some of the young players that are trying to establish their role. I want to specifically shout out safety Jordan Howden. Now, you've heard me talk about Jordan Howden if you're an everydayer here on the show a lot, because I've talked all about how the Saints are, looking at him as a guy with the versatility of a PJ Williams, but with the ability to read the field and the vision of a Marcus Williams, and how good he's been and how many steps he's taken. He took another step today. Both Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu were available, but he still found himself in first-team reps while the Saints were working on some of those in-game situations. They put 48 seconds on the clock, and then they let the offense march down. And this was the first interception that Derek Carr has thrown in team drills all training camp so far. When he went to the back of the end zone, at the back at the left corner, this was the final set of team drills. So this wasn't the big touchdown one that I'll tell you about in a little bit. But went to the left sideline. And Jordan Howden ended up coming up over the top of it. Chris Olave and Derek Carr had a little bit of a miscommunication, and bam, you were able to get Jordan Howden there in that back corner with the interception, which would have been a turnover, getting the New Orleans Saints offense back on the field. And those moments are the ones that you want to see from a rookie. And was it the easiest interception in the world or of his career? Yeah, probably. He didn't have to fight for anybody. He didn't have to sprint. He didn't have to move, but he was in the right place at the right time. So just like we were mentioning before, a big part of turnovers is mentality. It's skill. It's being in the right position. It's covering well. It's catching. It's all these other things, right? But as much as anything else, it's about being able to take advantage of of an opponent's or of an offense's mistakes. You have to be opportunistic as well. And now we're seeing an opportunistic defense. Derek Carr actually was intercepted twice in camp today during today's practices, the first of which was by Marshon Lattimore in 7-on-7, so we don't count it as much because you got to throw the ball. You're going to get it. You can't run the ball. You're not sprinting. You're not scrambling in 7-on-7s. Like, you're just going to try to force passes in, so that doesn't really matter. But that team interception, the miscommunication between he and Chris Olave, as good as they've been all offseason and all training camp, there's always going to be something that can happen to any pair of players, to any team, all those things. So the defense has to be able to show up in those moments. Jordan Howden helped the defense do exactly that. A.T. Perry, another guy that I have a lot of confidence in, is going to be able to eventually kind of turn the corner, climb the ladder, however it is that you want to look at it. Struggled to catch some passes again today in contested situations. What happens when he's in game? What happens when that extra adrenaline boost is there? Does that make a difference for him? Brian Brzee, he ended up having, he had a day today to where, look, he was in the neutral zone, right? So it gave the offense a free play. I'll tell you more about that play here in just a bit, but can he clean up those little things? So you're going to look for some of the operational stuff too, and you're going to watch for some of the young players to make sure that they're, coming along and everything. But I do think that you look at where the Saints are and where they're headed, and a lot of this, you can kind of look and pull some information from what you're going to see in this training camp, this preseason game, and then start to develop some expectations, although you won't be able to just copy and paste those expectations. You'll have to adjust a little bit. But I do think that there's enough to watch in this preseason game that's a lot more than just, I'm going to watch this because football's on, right? There's actually something to take away from these games. And so to give us a little bit more insight for how the New Orleans Saints are getting prepared for this game, let's take a look at what we saw during today's practice. We had a skirmish, we had some big plays, and we had some turnovers. Let's break it all down as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with our look at where the Saints are after today's practice. Today was the final practice on Friday, day 14, before their preseason game on Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs. I want to start off with the skirmish, the kerfuffle, or whatever it is that people like to. There's all these different phrases that people use about camp fights and all these other things. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I'm going to be honest. The only takeaway that anybody ever really gets from a fight in practice is like, oh, well, at least they're super excited and they're passionate and all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, yeah, sure. Like that's a thing. But to me, there's far more exciting things like football itself. But I will say this. There was a level of camaraderie. And the thing that I actually do take away from this particular fight or this particular like situation was Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen wasted no time getting out on the field, getting everybody to stop, and basically saying, if you want to be boxers, we can work out like boxers and we can go outside and you can just run around the gym, basically. And he put an end to it quickly. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. So if you're somebody, and I see this in the chat right now, that sees fights as a lack of discipline, it means you want somebody to step in and be the disciplinarian. Dennis Allen stepped in to be the disciplinarian. The reason why this is such a big takeaway for me is because this is a different Dennis Allen than what we saw last year. Not that Dennis Allen last year let fights happen. Remember, he booted Trevor Penning and another player out of practice last year. But it just went a little differently this time. Nobody got booted from practice. Nobody was kicked out, nothing like that. But he challenged the team to straighten up. They did, and then they were able to move on with practice. And I got a lot of respect for that. The next thing that I want to look at here is the big play. So let's talk about two plays of the day today. So I'll start with the biggest one, which was Chris Olave and Derek Carr linking up for yet another touchdown here during training camp. I know, shocker. But it was the manner by which this touchdown was had that I loved. So they're working on a 3rd and 7 scenario. This is in a hurry-up situation, in-game situation, all that kind of stuff. Need a touchdown. Derek Carr comes up. He gives a hard count. Remember, this is a 3rd and 7. He gives a hard count. Brian Brzee jumps into the neutral zone because of that hard count. So Derek Carr gets a free play. Snaps the ball, drops back, looks deep, and then just puts that pass downfield about 44 yards in the end zone for Chris Olave, who's being covered by Alontae Taylor, who had good, solid coverage. Not a lot more that Alontae Taylor could have done outside of become Chris Olave and ask him to no longer catch that and convince him to no longer catch that pass. Like, he would have had to have literally found a way to just change Chris Olave's mind and make him not want to catch the pass. It's the only way that he could do it. And so Chris Olave goes up, skies over Alontae Taylor, grabs the pass, comes down with the touchdown, and everyone goes nuts. Derek Carr's yelling. Chris Olave's in the end zone yelling. The offensive line is celebrating. Defensive guys were celebrating. It was just one of those moments where you saw that and you went, okay, that is the moment that you want to see replicated throughout the season. It doesn't have to be that thing every time, right? It doesn't have to be that type of touchdown. It doesn't have to be a 44-yard deep pass that he's got to go up and get. Whatever it is, this is the intensity you want to see from the New Orleans Saints offense, and you love it. The next piece of it, or the next play of the day, happened in sort of these 2-on-2s that the Saints are running. So if you can imagine an offense in a goal line situation with 2 receivers over on the right side, one of which is going to run a route that gets them immediately into the end zone, and another the other player from the inside, is going to run a route that ducks underneath and then kind of forces the 2 defenders to kind of crash into one another, things like that. What the offense would call a rub route, what the defense would call a what do you want to call it? Oh, a pick route, right? And so they're working on those. And so I think that it was Keith Kirkwood on the inside as he started, then he peeled off to the back corner of the end zone, covered by Paulson Adebo, who again could not have better coverage, just like we saw with Alontae Taylor. Could not have better coverage. The ball goes up. It's got to be a leaping catch, kind of a jump ball opportunity. Keith Kirkwood goes up with one hand, and just picks it, just like you would pick like a lime or an apple off of a. Do apples grow on trees? Yes, there's an apple tree. A lime or an apple off of a tree. Like that kind of nonchalantness. And then comes down with it and then brings it home for the touchdown. It was a fantastic moment. It was another really big play. And these are the things that you're seeing from this New Orleans Saints offense that are super exciting. I see somebody asking, how many yards do I think Chris Olave will have this season? I will say 3,000 receiving yards. I don't genuinely think that, obviously. I think he'll clear the 1,000-yard for sure. And I think he's probably got the most targets, most receptions, and most yards on the team as a receiver as well. He's been that good throughout training camp, and he was that good his rookie season in game. So I think you could translate his growth to the field for sure. Sorry, I know videos having some issues over here. I appreciate y'all's patience. So the last thing that I'll mention here as OBS starts to kind of crap out a little bit here, is that okay. All right. I think that we're in a better place here. So, the next thing that we're looking for here is, of course, like the turnovers and the things that we're seeing from all of that in terms of the Saints taking advantage of those opportunities and being able to get those opportunities and be able to bring home some of those interceptions and create some of those turnovers. I think that that's a big. Oh gosh, YouTube is just having some issues, y'all. I'm so sorry. Okay, we're working now. Okay, thank you. All right, so I think that the thing that we're looking at here, just to wrap it up, like we'll just wrap this up and we'll power through like what we can get here. But the thing that we're loving about the turnovers is that the Saints are finding ways to get them, whether they be punch outs on the fumble side, whether it be interceptions, things like that. You love what the New Orleans Saints are giving you from that side of the ball as well. And they're going up against an offense that's proving to be better than expected, while the offense is proving to go up against a defense that is still top notch and all that. So that's where we're at. I think the offensive line remains to be the biggest question. So you'll get an opportunity to get a look at the offensive line on Sunday and then see how things all work out from there. But we'll go ahead and wrap this up since YouTube is kind of crapping out here. But I appreciate y'all very much. We'll be live after the show and everything, or live after the game and everything to recap all of it and kind of look at what are the takeaways from that preseason matchup. But I appreciate y'all as always. Once again, all the everydayers make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. As always, if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints, you know where to go. I appreciate you making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family is doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.